Good evening, brothers and sisters. Tonight, I want to invite you to journey back in time with me to a valley filled with dust and fear, where a story was written not with ink, but with stone, with faith, and with blood. It is the story of David and Goliath. Perhaps every one of us has heard this story before. A small shepherd boy defeats a battle-hardened giant with nothing but a single stone. It has become a symbol of the underdog overcoming the mighty, of the impossible becoming possible. But tonight, I don't want to just retell what happened. I want to go deeper with you into the heart of the boy David, into the stillness of the Bethlehem fields, into the despair of the Israelite army, and into the very arrogance of the giant Goliath. Together, we will search for a secret. What was the real secret behind that extraordinary victory? Was it just a lucky shot? Or was it the result of something far greater, an invisible strength forged over many years in quiet faithfulness? The story of David versus Goliath, the secret of a boy who conquered a giant, is a journey to discover that the greatest battles are sometimes decided not by the size of the warrior, but by the size of the faith that resides within their heart. I invite you to quiet your hearts and let us begin the story. Part 1. The Valley of Fear. The Valley of Elah was steeped in a tense silence. Two armies stood facing each other on opposing hills, like two wild beasts growling before a fight to the death. On one side, the army of the Philistines, formidable and battle-ready. On the other, the army of Israel, God's chosen people. But now, their hearts were filled with fear. That fear had a name: Goliath. Every morning and every evening, he would step out from the Philistine ranks. He didn't look like a man. He was a moving mountain of flesh and bone, standing nearly 10 feet tall. His bronze armor gleamed under the sun, weighing more than a normal man. The shaft of his spear was as thick and long as a weaver's beam. But the most terrifying thing wasn't his size or his weapons. It was his voice. A voice that thundered across the valley, sowing humiliation and terror. "You servants of Saul," he bellowed, "why have you come out to draw up your battle lines? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us. This day I defy the armies of Israel." And then he would unleash blasphemies, insulting the God of Israel. For 40 days. For 40 long days, the army of Israel had to listen to those challenges. King Saul and all his soldiers were dismayed, terrified, and utterly demoralized. Fear was like a poison, seeping into their minds, paralyzing their courage, and fading their faith. They forgot they were the army of the living God. All they could see was a giant that no one could defeat. The Valley of Elah had become the Valley of Fear. Part 2. The unnamed shepherd, meanwhile, miles away from the battlefield, in the green pastures near Bethlehem, there existed another world entirely. A world of peace. David, the youngest son of Jesse, was there. He was not a warrior. He was just a shepherd boy with sun-kissed skin, reddish-brown hair, and bright eyes. His duty was not to fight the enemy, but to care for his father's flock. The life of a shepherd, though lonely, was far from boring. For David, it was a school, He learned patience while searching for lost lambs. He learned courage when facing wild beasts. And most importantly, he learned how to talk with God. In the quiet of the hills, David did not feel alone. He saw the greatness of God in the brilliant sunrise, in the sparkling stars of the night sky. He heard God's voice in the whistling wind, in the babbling brook. He would take up his harp, strumming melodies and singing songs of praise to the Lord. The relationship between David and God wasn't a distant doctrine. It was an intimate friendship, cultivated daily in the stillness. And he had a weapon, not a sword or a spear, just a sling. Every day, while tending the sheep, he practiced. He would set up a small target on a distant rock and let a stone fly. Whiz! The stone would hit its mark. For him, this wasn't a game. It was a survival skill to protect his flock from wolves or lions. His hand had become skilled, and his eye had become sharp. He had no idea that here, in these anonymous fields, God was quietly preparing him for a great battle. Part 3. A mission from a father. One morning, Jesse, David's father, called him. David's 3 oldest brothers were all in King Saul's army. Jesse was worried about his sons. "David, my son," he said, "take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers. And take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them." David obeyed. He did not complain. Early the next morning, after leaving the flock with another shepherd, he loaded the food onto a donkey and set out. He thought it was a simple trip to visit his brothers, a small mission from his father. He had no idea that his steps were being guided by God himself, straight toward his destiny. The journey wasn't long, but it took him from a world of peace to a world of tension. The closer he got to the Valley of Elah, the heavier the air became. He could smell the scent of fear. Part 4. An insulting challenge. When David reached the camp, he left his things and hurried to the battle lines to find his brothers. He found them, and while he was joyfully greeting them, it happened. From the other side of the valley, the giant Goliath stepped out again. And David, for the first time, heard with his own ears the giant's arrogant and blasphemous challenges. He heard him insult the army of Israel. And worse, he heard him defy the name of the living God. David was stunned. But what stunned him even more was the reaction of the soldiers around him. When they heard Goliath's voice, they all trembled and drew back in fear. Not a single man dared to answer. Their silence was an admission of defeat. A fire ignited in David's heart. Not fear, but outrage. A holy outrage. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine," he asked the soldiers around him in a loud voice, "that he should defy the armies of the living God? What will be done for the man who kills him and removes this disgrace from Israel?" The soldiers told him about the king's reward: great wealth, the king's daughter in marriage, and exemption from taxes for his family. But it seemed no one cared about the reward. All they saw was an unbeatable giant. Part 5. A heart of faith, Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard what his younger brother was saying. He burned with anger. "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." His older brother's rebuke did not discourage David. he replied gently, then turned to other soldiers and repeated his question. He couldn't understand it. Why was everyone so afraid? Had they forgotten who their God was? The words of David, an unknown shepherd boy, began to spread through the camp. One man told another. His words held no bravado, but they possessed something that all the experienced warriors had lost: faith. Eventually, the story of the boy who dared to speak with courage reached the ears of King Saul. Part 6. Before the king, King Saul sent for David. Standing before the tall king, who was drowning in anxiety, David showed no fear. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine," David said boldly. "Your servant will go and fight him." Saul looked at the boy before him, a shepherd boy, with no weapon, too young for battle. "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him," Saul said, his voice full of doubt. "You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." And this is when David revealed his first secret, the secret of his quiet preparation. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." And then he revealed the true source of his strength. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." David's words were not arrogant. They were a testimony of faith, a faith built on real experience. He wasn't talking about things he had heard. He was talking about what God had done for him. Saul, in his desperation, had no other choice. "Go," he said, "and the Lord be with you." Part 7. The Ill-Fitting Armor. King Saul, still thinking in human terms, tried to equip David in the best way he knew how. He dressed David in his own tunic, put a coat of bronze armor on him, a bronze helmet on his head, and gave him his own sword. David put on the armor. It was too heavy, too cumbersome. He tried walking a few steps and found it incredibly awkward. This was a decisive moment. David could have tried to wear this armor into battle. It was the king's armor, a symbol of earthly power and strength. Wearing it might have made him feel safer, but David made a wise choice. He took it off. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." This is the second secret, refusing the ill-fitting armor. David did not rely on borrowed strength. He didn't try to be someone else, a warrior like Saul. He decided to be himself, a shepherd. He would fight with what was familiar to him, with the skills God had given him, and with his own faith. So many of us fail because we try to wear someone else's armor instead of trusting in what God has equipped us with. Part 8. 5 Smooth Stones. After refusing King Saul's armor, David took only his shepherd's staff, his sling, and a leather bag. He walked down to a small stream that flowed through the valley. He bent down and carefully selected his ammunition. Not just any rocks. He chose 5 smooth stones. This was not a random act. It was deliberate and full of meaning. Why 5? Perhaps he was preparing backup shots. But on a deeper level, each stone could have been a symbol of his faith. The first stone could be faith in the past. God had saved him from the lion and the bear. The second, faith in the present. God was with him right there in the valley. The third, faith in the future. God would give him victory. The fourth, faith in his purpose. He was fighting not for personal glory, but for the name of the Lord. The fifth, faith in God's power, not human strength. He placed the 5 stones in his shepherd's bag. Now he was ready. His weapon was not the stones. His weapon was his faith, made tangible in those 5 smooth stones. Part 9. The Confrontation. David walked out from the Israelite ranks, down into the valley. From the other side, Goliath also strode forward with heavy steps. When he saw his opponent, he couldn't believe his eyes. Not a seasoned warrior, but just a shepherd boy, with a ruddy complexion and a small frame. Goliath felt insulted. He let out a hideous laugh. "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" He roared. He cursed David by his gods. "Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." The entire Israelite army held its breath. Fear gripped them. But David did not flinch. He looked the giant straight in the eye. And this is when he made his greatest declaration, revealing his final and most important secret. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin," David's voice rang out, clear and strong, without a trace of fear. "But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." In one sentence, David completely reframed the battle. This was no longer David versus Goliath. This was the living God versus the false gods of the Philistines. David was merely an instrument in God's hands. "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands," David continued, "and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's." That is the ultimate secret. The battle is the Lord's. When we fight for His name, we do not fight alone. Part 10. The Stone of Destiny. After his declaration, Goliath moved angrily toward him. David didn't hesitate either. He ran quickly toward the giant. His action was extraordinary. While the entire army retreated, David ran forward. He ran toward the danger, ran toward his problem, with absolute faith. As he ran, he reached into his bag and took out a stone. He placed it in his sling. Everything seemed to slow down. Both armies held their breath. Time seemed to stand still. David whirled the sling. Once, twice. The sling whistled through the air. Then he released it. The stone flew, a small dot tearing through the air, heading straight for its target. Goliath, in his arrogance, perhaps didn't react in time. Or maybe he thought a small stone could do him no harm. He had only one weak spot in his entire armored body, the space on his forehead, between his eyes. And the stone struck him right there. Thud. A small sound, but it was the sound that decided a war. The stone sank deep into Goliath's forehead. The giant's eyes widened in disbelief. He staggered. The moving mountain began to sway. And then, with a world-shaking crash, Goliath fell face down on the ground. The entire valley was silent for a second. Then, A deafening roar of victory erupted from the Israelite army. They could not believe their eyes. The giant had fallen. Fear had been defeated. Part 11. The Dawn of a Hero. David ran and stood over the giant. Since he had no sword, he drew Goliath's own sword from its sheath and used it to cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they were terrified and ran in disarray. The Israelite army, filled with extraordinary new courage, charged forward, pursuing and routing their enemies. That day, a great victory belonged to Israel. David became a hero. He was brought before King Saul, still holding the head of Goliath. When he returned, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet him with singing and dancing. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. A new dawn had arrived for the nation of Israel, and also for the life of David. He was no longer an anonymous shepherd boy. He had become a mighty warrior, a savior. Glory, fame, and new challenges awaited him. The victory in the Valley of Elah opened a new path, a path that would eventually lead him to the throne. Part 12. The Shadow of the Giant. Many years passed. The shepherd boy of yesterday was now King David, the greatest king in the history of Israel. He had won countless other battles, expanded the kingdom, and brought peace and prosperity to his people. Tonight, King David stood on the roof of his palace in Jerusalem. The city glittered with lights below. He had everything: power, wealth, respect. In the palace armory, Goliath's sword was still kept as a trophy of war. Sometimes, David would still go there, look at it, and remember that fateful day in the Valley of Elah. He had defeated that giant. But he knew, deep in his heart, that there were other, more fearsome giants. There was the giant of pride, which led him to sin by taking a census of the people, angering the Lord. There was the giant of lust, which led him to sin with Bathsheba and murder Uriah, a loyal soldier. There was the giant of family failure, as his own sons rebelled and brought about civil war. David sighed. The battle with the external Goliath took place in a single morning and was decided by one stone. But the battle with the giants inside his own soul lasted a lifetime, and it required repentance, humility, and God's forgiveness every single day. The victory in the valley had brought him to the pinnacle of glory. But that very glory had created new shadows, new trials. He realized that defeating the enemy without is sometimes far easier than conquering the self within. The shadow of the giant from long ago was still there, not in the valley, but right here in the palace, in the very heart of the king. And that is where our story pauses for tonight, in the quiet contemplation of King David. So, what was the secret to that extraordinary victory? It was the preparation in the quiet moments, the courage to refuse armor that wasn't his, the reframing of the battle, and above all, the recognition that the battle belongs to the Lord. But the story of David doesn't just end with one victory. It leaves us with a profound question, a theme for us to ponder and discuss. Was the battle with Goliath in the Valley of Elah the greatest battle of David's life? Or was the greatest, most difficult battle the one against the giants of sin and temptation that arose after he had gained power and glory? Defeating an external giant made David a hero. But it was fighting the giants within, stumbling and knowing how to repent, That made him a man after God's own heart. So, what is the true Goliath in each of our lives? Is it the external difficulties and challenges we face? Or is it the pride, the weakness, the selfishness that lies deep within us? Defeating which Goliath truly brings freedom to the soul. The story of David and Goliath is not just a story of victory. It's a reminder that after every victory, a new battle begins. And the most important battle is the one fought in the valley of our own hearts. That is a question I will leave with you to reflect upon.